It is my pleasure to call to order the 183rd meeting of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, again held at our offices at 101 Federal Street at 1 o'clock on March 22nd. As has been my practice since I recused myself from the deliberations on Region C, Region A, thank you, when there have been replays of that or issues which came out of that period, I have chosen to recuse myself. So I will recuse myself from participation in the discussions today. And as has been our practice since Commissioner McDonald was not here when those Region A deliberations took place, where the roots of the Section 61 findings were sown or were planted, he is going to recuse himself as well, although we'll both sit here. And Commissioner Zuniga will chair the meeting for purposes of this agenda item.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have only one item on the agenda today, and that's the legal division to present the Wynn draft Section 61 presentation and review. General Counsel Liu.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Last fall, the Commission reviewed and determined the process it would use for drafting and approving the Section 61 findings for the Wynn project. Today, the Commission is beginning the formal process for approving the final Section 61 findings for the project. As we discussed then, the Wynn MEPA certificate contained certain additional steps, such as a public hearing, that the Commission needs to incorporate into its review process. While the Commission was working on its draft Section 61 findings, other permitting agencies, such as MassDOT, DEP, and the MWRA, were working on their Section 61 findings. The Commission will incorporate the final Section 61 findings from these permitting agencies into the Commission's final Section 61 findings. Before I go over the steps the Commission needs to take, I want to go over the steps that MassDOT was required to take before it could issue its Section 61 findings. Those steps include revising the MassDOT Section 61 findings based upon discussions with Wynn and other stakeholders, identifying Wynn's financial contribution to the regional working group identified in the MEPA certificate, publishing MassDOT Section 61 findings in the Environmental Monitor for a 15-day public review and comment period, holding a public meeting to review comments and accept additional comments, and publish the final Section 61 findings within 40 days of the publication of the draft Section 61 findings in the Environmental Monitor. MassDOT has taken all of the required steps up to the point of issuing its final Section 61 findings. We expect that they will do so within the required timeframe. Staff, with the assistance of outside counsel, has completed draft Section 61 findings and has provided the draft findings to Commission consultants for their review. The consultants have reviewed the project as currently configured against the draft Section 61 findings. The purpose of the consultants' review is to make recommendations on possible changes or additions to the draft Section 61 findings. Staff has also provided the draft Section 61 findings to Wynn for its review. Wynn's mitigation presentation, the Commission's consultants' report, and the Commission's draft Section 61 findings are in the Commission packet. We have also included MassDOT's presentation from their Section 61 public hearing. Wynn is here today to present to the Commission on their overall project mitigation plan. The Commission's consultants are here today to summarize their report and to answer any questions from the Commission. The Commission will review the presentation and recommendations from the consultants and authorize staff to make any changes if changes are necessary. After today's meeting, in accordance with the process we discussed last fall, staff will post the draft Section 61 findings as well as the consultants' reports on the Commission's website with a request for comments. Staff has already posted what we've referred to as the staff draft or the preview draft on the Commission's website on March 18th just to get a jump on the process for obtaining comments. The Commission will hold a public hearing on March 29th to solicit comments from the public and other interested parties on the draft Section 61 findings. The comment period will remain open until April 11th. The Commission will receive comments by email to MGC Comments or by regular mail. All comments will be gathered and provided to Commissioners before the April 14th Commission meeting. At the Commission meeting on April 14th, the Commission will consider the comments received and determine whether any revision should be made to the draft Section 61 findings. Once the commission finds the final Section 61 findings to be complete, the commission will vote to incorporate the Section 61 findings into the Wynn license, authorize staff to file the Section 61 findings for publication in the Environmental Monitor, and vote to take final action on the Region A license. Thereafter, at each quarterly report, Wynn will report to the commission on its compliance with the Section 61 findings. There are a couple important points to keep in mind. Section 61 findings are a determination at a fixed point in time regarding whether all feasible measures have been taken to avoid or minimize the impacts of the project and damage to the environment. The commission reserves the right to reopen the Section 61 findings in the future if the commission finds additional mitigation is required. The other point is that if there are unanticipated impacts from the project that require mitigation, the commission will entertain applications to the Community Mitigation Fund in the coming years for funding to address those impacts. Are there any questions at this point?
So just to clarify, the MassDOT Section 61 findings, just tell me that date again.
They should be done in the next couple days,
Okay,
and then once we get their final, we'll review them, and we'll review them against our draft and make any changes that we need to make.
okay. But the public hearing that they conducted took place, remind me?
I think about 2 weeks ago now?
Okay.
Yes. Mhm. Okay, if there are no further questions, I would ask Wynn to begin its presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, and thank you, General Counsel Blue, for that very thorough intro. With me today is Chris Gordon, immediately to my right, who is President of Wynn Design Development, Massachusetts, and Jackie Crum, who is Senior Vice President and General Counsel. First of all, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present this very comprehensive mitigation plan for our project. And before I turn this over to Chris for the first few items, I want to address one particular thing. Last week, Mr. Wynn was in town, and he unveiled new models of the property. We have 2 new models over in our Medford office, along with some new renderings that we introduced, and you'll see those a little later in our presentation. But we also introduced a new name for the project, and I want to spend a minute just talking about that, Wynn Boston Harbor, as the name that we've selected for the project. First and foremost, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. Our location and our address is in Everett, Massachusetts. It always has been, it always will be. And I want to make sure that's clear, because it's important that we don't forget our community that we are located in, our host community, the tremendous support that we have always received from the Everett residents, which we're always thankful for. They attend all the meetings. They've been great supporters of the project. So we are and always have been in Everett, Massachusetts. Now, why the name? Why the interest in the name change? You know, after some long discussion between the team with Mr. Wynn, we felt that our connection to the water and the harbor was a critical part of the ongoing success of the project. And the ongoing success of the project is important for our 4,000 employees that are going to be working there, as well as the Commonwealth and the expected revenue tax generation that derives from the project. And the more that we look at the model, the more that we look at the renderings, and you realize how much we really salute the water. And I know we are at the mouth of the Mystic River, but we are also part of the Boston Harbor watershed. A lot of people maybe don't realize how active a port, really a port city, Everett is, and connected to the Port of Boston. It just, in one example alone, is when you think of the LNG tankers that come up. We are in an area that's below the Amelia Earhart Dam. We are tidal. I'm sure a lot of people don't realize we have about an 8 to 9 foot swing daily in our tide out in front, and that's why we're designing our dock system to be able to accommodate the tidal swing. And of course, as most everyone knows, you don't get 8 or 9 feet of tidal swing in a river. And so we are below the dam. We think we are a very important part of the harbor scenario, even though, of course, we know we are at the mouth of the Mystic River. We want to celebrate that. We think it's important. I had multiple discussions with the mayor, Mayor DiMaria in Everett. He supports the move. He also thinks that when you look at the Wynn project and what we're doing and how we're presenting ourselves to the waterfront, that the fact that we're using this name and embracing this name will actually help support the Lower Broadway Master Plan and other economic development projects, because in a sense, really what we're doing is grabbing that harbor and all the equity that's in it and bringing that right up to the mouth of the Mystic River and the Everett location where we are. And so, you know, I've had long discussions about it. We're going to have more discussions, both with elected officials in the town as well as residents of Everett. But I thought it would be important that we didn't just slip that in on a PowerPoint slide, that we spent a few minutes talking about why we felt that was important for the project. And with that, now I'm going to turn it over to Chris to start the first discussion on the Section 61 findings.
Okay, thank you, Bob. As you know, there's quite a process for the Section 61 findings, so we've been working for a number of months to achieve that. There were other Section 61 findings leading up to the Gaming Commission Section 61 finding. As you see the list on slide 3, MWRA, Massport, Mass DEP, the DOT, including MBTA, and also combined with DCR, are all Section 61 findings that are complete. We did talk to the DOT this morning, and they do expect to post that tomorrow, so we think that'll be the last one. And then, of course, we look forward to working with the Gaming Commission on yours. So we think we're near the end of that, but there's a lot of material we're going to talk about today that's included in all those and then wrapped up into the Gaming Commission's finding. Very briefly, and I know you know the project well, but for any new commissioners and also for anyone listening, we want to make sure we give you a brief overview of the project before we dive into the benefits. As you can see on the slide, we're located in Everett on the lot approximately in the middle of that slide. We'll zoom in a second, but it's between Broadway, otherwise known as Route 99, the MBTA commuter rail tracks. We're across the river from Assembly Row. We're just south of the MBTA's repair shop. We're in an ideal location on the river and on the harbor for access downtown, roadway access, and other things you'll hear about today during the transportation portion of the briefing. The site has a long history. It was the home to 3 different chemical companies since the 1800s. It was a heavy industrial site where a lot of chemicals were manufactured. Things like sulfur were used there extensively. Sulfuric acid was actually manufactured there. It was transported from there, and we'll show you some photos in a second. Dyes and acids were made there. Monsanto was the longest owner of the property. They owned it from 1929 to 1983. When they left behind a lot of residual products in the ground, primarily heavy metals. We have arsenic, lead, copper, a number of things that are still in the ground as we go through the remediation process. Coincidentally, it also was the original home of the Union Oyster House, where they got their oysters, the oldest restaurant in America. So it started as the home of the purest, cleanest oysters and ended up as a chemical plant. So it had an ugly transition there, if you will. The next slide, it shows an historic photo of the site. In the lower left, below the tracks, that's our site. If you look in the background for wayfinding, you can see the Custom House Tower, the only high-rise on the horizon. You can see the little toll on the bridge going across the river. But more important, in the foreground, you can see the chemical plant as Monsanto ran it. And ironically, as you look at that layout of buildings and tanks, we can track some of our worst contamination to some of the biggest tanks. So it's not a coincidence that some of those tanks were leaking, they were not well maintained. We still have foundations of the crane on the right. So that historic legacy has remained on the site, which is one of the reasons it's remained vacant for close to 30 years until it was proposed for redevelopment. It also had a bit of an environmental activist site. You can see that Green Harbors did a civil disobedience on the site and a few other things. So it's been the site of controversy in the environmental world for many decades, trying to get it cleaned up. So it's not a new issue. This goes back a very long time trying to get this site cleaned up. It's one of the worst sites around. The next slide shows the site just before we started the remediation. It was a vacant lot for roughly 30 years. There were containers stored there, trucks parked there, but there was no real activity there. There was material from Deer Island was brought there and put on top of it. So the top 8 feet is actually tunnel muck from the tunnel from Deer Island that goes out into the harbor. It was dumped here with the goal of creating a clean site. Well, as you know, you don't really create a clean site just by putting a layer of clean dirt on top of dirty dirt. So we're going below that clean layer and cleaning it up. But there is a layer of clean dirt there, which again was meant to enable development a number of years ago. If you look at the development history, we became involved in 2012. Steve Wynn identified the site. It was brought to his attention. He took great interest, and we've worked our way through the process since then. In 2013, we started obviously with our gaming application, our environmental applications, and things really heated up in 2013. Through 2014, we had a number of filings. We also were successful in our surrounding community agreements, which Jackie's going to talk about a little bit later. Working all the way through, we obviously went through the statewide referendum, and we were selected for our Region A license, which we're quite very, very pleased about. And then in 2015, we continued with design and permitting. You can see a number of permitting activities there. It is quite a journey to get a permit for a project like this, so we've worked our way through a number of different federal, state, and local permits. And then, of course, in 2016, we are here today trying to work our way through the Section 61 finding. You'll see other things like selecting our construction contractor, Suffolk, working on the remediation, and et cetera. So we're far along in the process. Next is slide 11. This is a summary of our current program for the building. We have about 4,500 gaming positions proposed for the building. We have about 629 keys. This is a combination of rooms and suites in the hotel. You can see the square footages, but we have an extensive retail pavilion, which will be a key part of the project, where there'll be high-end retail, where people can browse either as part of their gaming day or not part of their gaming day. They can be there to shop. Also dining, we have a number of restaurants where people can eat. And again, this is meant to be either part of gaming or not part of gaming. It'll be up to the patron, whether they're there for that or for something else. Spas, gyms, extensive convention space, so a very mixed-use building. In the 3 million square feet, there's many things that are tucked into the same resort. The intent being, of course, to attract people that might want to be there for different things, or to entertain people that might be there with a spouse or whatever it might be. So there's going to be, a lot of different things to do in the building. Next is a site plan. You've seen this before, so we won't spend a lot of time on it, but starting left to right, you can obviously see the river and the harbor off to the left of the page. You'll see an arrow that says connecting to the to DCR. We're going to be connecting over to the DCR Park, which is just north of here, which you'll see a little later, some slides for bikes and pedestrians. Moving in, you see a large oval. That's an event lawn. That is a very carefully designed space where we can have weddings, outdoor, community concerts, all sorts of stuff. You can get close to 1,000 people in that outdoor space that could be there for a function if that was desired. The views from there are spectacular, looking back over the city and over the harbor. Moving to the right, the end of the building toward the water is primarily meeting and convention space. There's a large ballroom there with a stage, which can be used for a variety of functions. From there toward the middle of the building is mostly where the retail and the food and beverage is. So that'll be a pavilion with shopping on both sides, access to the outdoors, access to the waterfront. Moving a little further into almost the middle of the page, you see the crescent-shaped outline on the drawing. That's the hotel tower. That's where the 629 hotel rooms are. Below that, of course, is lobbies and access that way. And then behind that is gaming. So the gaming is behind the hotel tower. So someone can choose to go to gaming or choose to not go to gaming. And then behind that, there's a very large back-of-house area with utility plants and employee spaces and a number of things for employees. Off to the page to the right is a service road that services into the site. And then, of course, the landscaping and waterfront is a very comprehensive effort to restore the waterfront and make the outdoor space very usable. Some facts, as you heard Steve Wynn talk about last week, we're in the $2 billion range right now. We have a lot of work going on the estimate and a lot of work going on pricing, and now we have a contract. We're out in the market. We're talking to subcontractors. This isn't a growth because suddenly prices have gone up. This is a refinement of the estimate. We've now got enough information. We have detailed designs of the interior, detailed designs of the exterior. We've got most of our permits, so this is really an accurate estimate as opposed to something to change since we did the last number. So we're getting quite comfortable in that range. That's where we ought to be. Of that, a little more than half is hard costs, and the rest is a variety of other things. It's gaming commission fees, it's design, it's also land acquisition, that sort of stuff. We're still at about 4,000 permanent employees that Bob will be hiring. That has already started. We've got people in the office today that are full-time employees, and that'll grow, of course, toward opening. That'll put us immediately in the top 5 employers in the state, which we're excited about. 4,000 construction jobs. We talk to the construction unions and trades and subcontractors every day, and they're all excited, and we're out talking to them about ramping up on this, and we're very confident of getting 4,000 workers. We were worried about that initially, but it's a diverse workforce, so we've been talking to them not just about anybody, but making sure we get a diverse workforce on the job site. So that's been going, we think, very well. Millions will be spent on local materials. We have a lot of buying we're going to be doing, both during construction and once we open. Everybody who's working for us has got the word that if you can buy local, go do it. So whether it be, buying paper cups or buying vehicles or buying furniture or buying whatever you can, buy as much local as you can. And that's part of the procurement we do with a number of vendors and contractors. So that word is out. And it says here, once Bob is up and running, we expect he'll be around $100 million in vendor spending. So that's a big boost that companies in the area should be chasing as a future client. Go ahead.
This
Yep,
one?
yep.
On page 14, we have a breakdown of the gaming tax allocation. And just as a reminder, the column on the left, the percent dedicated, of course, comes from the enabling legislation and the funds that were created in order to be able to spread this gaming tax money through a number of very worthy causes throughout the Commonwealth, including such things as the Community Mitigation Fund, which, and again, this is all based on an estimate of our gaming revenue. So right now, we refine that estimate all the time. I know the commission's consultants went through their own estimations on it, but this number is, we keep hovering in this 830 to 840 million in gross revenue, and that would produce a little over $200 million at the 25% tax rate. But using those numbers as the estimate, substantial money going into these funds, 13 million in community mitigation, 41 million in the gaming local aid fund, which is distributed all throughout the Commonwealth. The education fund, 30 million in that, $30 million plus in the transportation fund. And so we think that, obviously, as we get up and running and generating those funds, there's a tremendous benefit throughout the Commonwealth. And for those that are not familiar with these numbers, this is on an annual basis. So this is not one time. This is recurring revenue from the 25%. The next slide is our exterior rendering. That is the rendering that we presented, I guess it was a year ago, January, so no difference there. I just wanted to start with that. But on the next page, we're now starting to show some of the renderings that Mr. Wynn introduced last week. You can see at the base of these escalators, this is a shot, by the way, after you come into the main lobby. We wanted to make sure that there was a great arrival sequence and a real wow space when you come into the building. Here you've got a series of curved escalators that lead you up to a cafe on one side and a lounge on the other side. But at the base is Jeff Koons' Popeye statue, which is currently in residence in Las Vegas, but was originally, as Mr. Wynn said, he purchased it for this particular project, and it had that in mind. And so that will be transported back over to Everett and installed at the base of the escalators. If you haven't been, for anyone that hasn't been to Las Vegas, pictures and renderings don't do it any justice. You really have to see it in person. It's a great work of art, and we'll be very pleased to have it on display. The next shot is a little wider angle shot of the main lobby. You can also see the tremendous floral works. We have a relationship with Preston Bailey, who's one of the great floral designists in the world. He does a lot of the feature work that you see at Wynn and Encore in Vegas, as well as over in Macau, and he'll be doing that work for our property as well. You can see also the tall skylight interior, and on the left-hand side, the presentation of the first stores in our retail esplanade. And then the next shot is a much more of a close-up shot of the first store immediately on your left on the retail esplanade, right behind that first store. You would actually take a left and then walk down, and you'd come across the other restaurants and retail stores. So you can see the quality of the finishes. It's really gorgeous work. We're very happy with what's been done by Roger Thomas and the interiors group in Las Vegas, and we think this is going to be something very special for the greater Boston area. And I'm going to turn it back over to Chris now to talk about LEED in our construction process.
As we transition into discussion of benefits and mitigation, we obviously want to start with some of the sustainability features. And the building is quite green. That's partly because we're pursuing LEED certification, but also because we just think it's the right thing to do, both from an image point of view and a business point of view. The biggest thing we're doing, of course, is cleaning up the site. We're going to show you photos in a minute, but we're deep into the remediation of the site. It's going very well. And the generations of fretting about it, we hope are going to come to an end, because most of the material has already left the site and is somewhere else in a lined landfill. So we're making good progress on that. We've done a number of other building features. We have a large array of solar panels on the roof. Almost the entire sunny side of the roof, if you will, is covered with solar panels. We're excited about that. That's power that will be used on-site, generated and used on-site. We've set up the plantings both inside and outside the building to minimize heat islands. So we will have rooftop gardens, we'll have indoor gardens, of course, outdoor plantings, and all that's meant to set up so we've got a softer, cooler area around the building so that you don't have big areas of pavement or hard surface to create heat islands. We're going to be using sustainable wood products wherever possible. So as much of the wood in the building, and there is a fair amount of wood that can be sustainably certified, we're going to be doing that. We talked about LEED Gold. We will definitely be achieving LEED Gold, if not higher. So we're actively pursuing that as we speak. Construction waste, if you know the construction business, an enormous percentage of construction materials are thrown away. They're sawed-off ends, they're extra pieces, they're misordered, they're whatever, and so there's just thousands of dumpsters of material at the end of a job like this. We're proposing to minimize that by at least 75% or reduce that by 75%, and that's a conscious effort by us, by Suffolk Construction, by all the subs involved. It's good business, and it's also a smart thing to do environmentally, so we're pushing very hard on that. We're also going to have 2 on-site cogeneration systems. If you're familiar with cogeneration, this is when you use a piece of equipment to generate heat, but then you also are able to generate other things off that, like electricity, hot water, other things off that. So we're going to be using cogeneration to significantly reduce our power costs and our pollution emitted from that, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. Also, water systems, we're going to be looking at reduced systems to save about 35% of the water. We're also going to be capturing rainwater for irrigation, so we're going to be using water as carefully as we can so that we can minimize that. The next picture is off our brand-new model. It's in Everett, and that shows, it's an example of one of the green roofs. If you know green roofs, they do a lot of things. They absorb rainwater and use it so they don't have a lot of runoff. They allow the roof to be cooler. It allows visually a better place to be. So there's a lot of advantages to green roofs, and we've got significant green roofs on the podium portion of the building.
No, pool will be there.
And the pool, that's right, it's right next to the pool. The next photo is a series of cogenerators. We're envisioning 2 to 3 of these, not as many as you see in this photograph, but this is the idea of what these are. Very large pieces of equipment that are highly efficient, and in a building like ours, there's a very quick payback on this kind of equipment. Also, once it's operating, once Bob has the building up and operating, we intend to be very green. It says 10% of our energy generated from green sources. That's things like solar panels and the cogeneration fixtures. It's also, part of it may be power that's purchased as well, but we definitely will be, we think, exceeding the 10% green power requirement. Energy performance systems, we've got a number of high-energy systems in the building. We're working closely with National Grid. They have a very active review and rebate system we're working on with National Grid. In other words, if you put much higher efficiency equipment in the building, it helps with the utility rates, it helps with rebates. Again, all good business, but also the right thing to do. So we're working highly aggressively on that, things like LED lights and, the different kitchen equipment, heating, cooling, all that sort of stuff. The lighting and optimization, we talked briefly about that. Electric vehicles, we're going to have 210 priority parking spots to charge electric vehicles. And you might think that's sort of a nice thing to do, but if you look around Massachusetts, people are using them. You see cars plugged in a lot more than you used to. So we'll have 210 spaces where somebody can plug their car in. The program is obviously expandable. If those 210 fill up on a regular basis, it's not hard to make 210 more. So we think that's a good thing to do in the garage. We'll be composting the food. We have a number of restaurants, so we're going to be working with a vendor to have that food taken and composted instead of just thrown away, which would be a waste. We're going to be sourcing as much local food as we can. Again, with being in New England and being in Massachusetts, why wouldn't you buy local food? So we'll do as much of that as we can. We talked about a 50,000-gallon stormwater harvesting system. In the garage, in the basement, there are large tanks that will store rainwater. That rainwater will then be reused for irrigation. So we'll have very little water used for irrigation. Most of it will just be recapturing rainwater. Saves runoff, saves water, saves all kinds of stuff. So we're very pleased about that. Jackie's going to talk a bit about the MIPA history and how we got here today.
So as you know, this has been a long process for us, the MIPA process. This says it's been a 2-year process. In May, it'll actually have been 3 years. But we've had over 10, 15 different consultants working on all different things such as wind studies, shadow analysis, transportation, lead, stormwater, and we're very proud of where we are today. We think it's a much more developed process than other developers in a similarly situated developers have gone through. As it says, we've filed over 10,000 pages of detailed analysis. We've received comment letters from a variety of different organizations, both government, public, private, as well as individuals. We've had to respond to every single comment that we received in these letters, which we've done so in our filings. As a result of this, we've agreed to make approximately $840 million in community and mitigation payments over a 15-year process, over 15 years. $574 million will be paid to our host and surrounding communities. Another $58 million will be done before we open for road infrastructure improvements. And we've also implemented a transportation demand management program, which will cost us about $208 million. This encompasses the Orange Line subsidy, the first of its kind, water transportation, and employee and customer shuttles. In addition to mitigation that we committed to through the MEPA process, we also, as you know, entered into agreements, host and surrounding and neighboring community agreements with Medford, Malden, Cambridge, Boston, Chelsea as surrounding communities, Everett as our host community, obviously, and Melrose and Lynn as neighboring communities. The total benefits that we'll be providing under these host and surrounding community agreements will be at $574 million over the 15-year period. Just a quick summary of our host community agreement. As you know, this was signed in April 2013 and approved by over 86% of the residents of the city of Everett in June of that year. It provides for $30 million in advance payments for a community enhancement fund, the first $5 million of which will be made upon receipt of our building permit or the start of construction, whichever comes earlier. Then we've agreed to approximately $25 million annually following the opening. $20 million of that will be for real estate taxes, $5 million for a community impact fee, and $250,000 a year for the Everett Citizens Foundation, which will be used to benefit nonprofits throughout Everett. We've also agreed to a job preference for residents of Everett, both on the construction and the operations phase, and we've agreed to transportation and infrastructure improvements that are also set forth in our MEPA filings. Here's just a summary of the payments that we've agreed to, both for Everett as well as our surrounding communities. As you can see, it totals $574 million over 15 years. This includes the upfront payments as well as the annual payments going forward. Finally, just a brief review of our most recent surrounding community agreement. I know we were here just recently, but just to highlight some of the commitments that we've made to the City of Boston. We've agreed to $25 million for the long-term Sullivan Square infrastructure improvement. That is in addition to the money that we'll be spending to mitigate our traffic impacts before we open, which is estimated to be approximately $11 million. In addition, we've agreed to $250,000 to fund the Sullivan Square Regional Working Group, which isn't actually the Sullivan Square Regional Working Group. I think the name has changed to the Lower Mystic Regional Working Group. And the purpose of this group isn't just to look at Sullivan Square, which is reflected in the new name. It's to look at the whole regional benefits. Obviously, the City of Boston is responsible for the ultimate solution to Sullivan Square. So this group is a little bit broader than that. One of the key things we want to point out in the Boston Surrounding Community Agreement is our continuing obligation to monitor operational deficiencies leading to excess traffic and to implement additional mitigation measures if necessary. And this comes up in a number of places. First of all, we've committed this to the City of Boston. We've also committed to do this in our MEPA filings and our Secretary's certificate to MassDOT, as well as to the Gaming Commission. Also in our Boston Surrounding Community Agreement, we've got an ongoing community outreach commitment, $2 million per year in community impact payment, and good faith efforts to purchase $20 million annually from Boston-based businesses, which Bob assures us should be no problem at all. And we've agreed to a hiring preference for Boston residents for constructions and operations jobs. And here's a picture just to prove that it actually happened. In terms of other benefits, this is not just to Boston, this is to all of our surrounding community agreements as well as our host community agreement. As I've mentioned, we have job preferences both on the construction and operations side. We've held already numerous vendor and job fairs and hope to, as we ramp up for construction again following the successful conclusion of our Chapter 91 appeal, to continue with job fairs. We've also made commitments to local vendor spending in each of our communities and support for local businesses. We've agreed to buy a certain amount of gift certificates from each community every single year. Finally, we are developing our concierge program, and that will be used to assist local businesses in participating with our guests. And here's a picture from Mr. Wynn's most recent visit on last Tuesday. And we had support and representation from Medford, Everett, Malden, Boston, and of course our state senators and reps from the districts. I will give you back to Chris for the transportation mitigation.
Okay, thank you. We want to give you an overview of where we are specifically on the mitigation commitments in the Section 61 finding. As you may remember from earlier briefings, we tried very hard to do a holistic approach to transportation. We didn't try to look just at roads or just at rail or just at walking. And this was our own doing, but also pushed very hard by the commission and by the various regulators around the state, is don't just look at one little intersection and figure that out. So as you can see, we looked at rail, buses, bikes, cars, boats, walking, and tried to make it a well-rounded approach to the project, so there's many different options for people. The next slide I know is a bit dense, but this is a summary of all the benefits. You've heard the numbers thrown around, but we just want to remind you of what they are. Pre-opening, we're envisioning spending a little under $42 million on transportation infrastructure. The biggest chunk of that is about $32.5 million on roadways, and I'm going to walk you through that in a minute of different roadways that we're envisioning repairing. We've got about $8.6 million to set up our water transportation system. That's boats and docks. We've got a very extensive system that we'll be funding ourselves completely to run around the harbor and get people to our site on boats. We have improvements to Wellington Station. We have DCR funding for the pedestrian bridge, and we're also improvements to Malden Station. So that $42 million gets spent before we open and will be done by us completely. Then you've got annual payments of about $15.6, which are payments that we make over time for various things you can see listed there. Over 15 years, that equals $223 million for a total of $265 million. So when you hear those numbers thrown around, we want to make sure we broke down what that entailed.
Chris, these numbers, sometimes there may be part of a host or surrounding community, but most of the time are not. Is that a fair statement? Or
Many
this
of
is
them are
still-
things, for example, the employee shuttles, the premium park and ride, a lot of those are things we do operationally that are not necessarily part of the agreements, but some, of course, specifically are part.
Yes, for instance, in the case of Medford, we committed to things in their surrounding community agreement that was also encompassed in our MIPA filing, so it
Right.
shows up in both places.
Right.
In certain circumstances.
But these are exclusive of many other non-infrastructure costs surrounding community payments.
That's correct. This does not include any of our actual monetary payments to the
Right.
surrounding community.
Right.
We also view these as firm commitments, which is part of the Section 61 fund. In other words, some of these things, even though they're operational, not just things we want to do, we actually are committed to doing them. So
Yep.
we know the importance of that commitment.
Right.
Chris, real quick, the last item, improvements to Malden Station.
Correct.
It's not a big-ticket item, just wondering what you do for $25,000.
You improve the ability for a bus to stop there. Right now, they've got various places where buses stop and pick people up. We want our buses to be able to have a clear place where they can pick people up that'll be recognizable. So this is some repaving, restriping, and signage so that people will know where to go to get the bus. It'll mostly be employees, but also some patrons, so there won't be confusion when they go. So we worked with the T on that and Wellington Station and Sullivan Square Station to redesign those stations. In some cases, like Malden, frankly, it's minor. Wellington, it's a bit more, and Sullivan Square, it's significant. We will be actually working closely with the T in a rebuilding of those stations.
But actually, this is a good example of where we've committed more to the city of Malden in the surrounding community agreement than is shown on this. So this is just our MIPA commitments.
Got it. Thank you.
Next, just to remind people, you always hear that sort of, how do you get there? Well, there's 3 stations very nearby. Sullivan Square and Wellington are both very close to the site. There's bus access from both to the site, and we'll be adding additional private bus access to the site. And frankly, they're within walking distance, so on a nice day, you could easily see employees or patrons doing the short walk from Wellington or Sullivan Square. Assembly Row, you can see it, but you can't get there, which is why we funded a study for a pedestrian bridge across the river. We're a big fan of that. We know anytime you put anything over a river, it's controversial, but we think eventually there will be a bridge that spans from the new Assembly Row T station to our site and to the DCR mall site next door. It creates an enormous benefit. It's one of the missing links in the overall transportation system nearby. So we're meeting with the DCR commissioner this week. We funded the study, and we're going to be moving forward with a study to look at that bridge. We hope the study goes well, and then we hope we're back talking about a commitment later on with other people to try to figure out how to make the bridge actually happen. You'll see here are some photographs of Park and Ride. Part of our mode split is a premium Park and Ride. This is where we're talking to Massport about teaming up with them, either at the Braintree site, the Woburn site, or the Framingham site, to add our own premium buses so someone can go there and park and ride in. I'm very familiar with the Massport system. It's been highly successful. They're usually full on busy times, so this would be the ability to use a system where people can park remotely that don't necessarily want to drive to the casino. You'll see in the bottom left-hand corner, that is a bus from the Macau property, so we know how to do this. This isn't a new idea. These are actually, we've done this in other places and know how to make those bus systems work. Also in this area around our site, there's a very active bicycle and pedestrian network. A lot of joggers, a lot of walkers, a lot of bike trails, and they're used. I mean, if you're out there on a regular basis, you see how often people are not just recreating, but commuting on bicycles and walking. Our site has always been a missing link in that. You can get north of here, you can go 20-some-odd miles north of here and 8 or 10 miles south of here, but you can't get across our site. By adding our site and connecting it with the bike trails and the harbor walk we're going to build on our property and connected to DCR, you can finally get all the way through the region on bicycles or on foot, which we think will work quite well. Transportation demand management, this is to not just let things happen, this is to try to control some behavior and try to get more people on mass transit, more people on boats, more people on buses, that sort of stuff. So there's a number of things we're gonna do that we've committed to, and I'll go through them quickly, but it's a very aggressive program that will fall within Bob's operating group. First of all, we'll have a full-time transportation coordinator. It sounds obvious, but this is a person whose job is to facilitate transportation for employees, for guests, you know, bus schedules, train schedules, boat schedules, how do you do it, where do you go, that sort of stuff. It makes sense if you put somebody on it, they will take it seriously. Guaranteed ride home. If you're an employee and you work late after the T stops running, we'll get you home. So it takes it off their mind if the T for some reason isn't running. Ride share, we'll do commuter boards, we'll do ride sharing, you know, blogs, that kind of stuff, so that if 5 people live in Framingham, they all know who they are and they can figure out how to commute together. And we'll help with change, you know, coordinating shifts and that sort of stuff. Charlie cards, we'll be providing discounted cards at a discounted rate to employees. We'll be selling them at the front desk to patrons. So if somebody wants to ride the T, it's easy. You just go buy a Charlie card and you're off and running. So we'll make that as easy as we could. Public transportation services, obviously we'll have a lot of information in the building. We'll have it electronically, we'll have it on paper. So if somebody's here from another state or another country and they want to figure out how to get to the Boston Garden, it's not hard. We'll make sure they know how to do that. We'll have zip cars on site. If somebody wants to rent a zip car, they can go do that and move on that way. Hubway, same way. We're going to have a Hubway bike sharing mode on site, so you can go down and rent a bicycle and take a ride on a bike. We'll have covered bicycle parking. Sounds silly, but employees love to have a nice place to put their bike, otherwise it's a little risky. It also makes the property look better when you have an organized place to put bikes. So we'll have a covered place where an employee can ride their bike, put it in the covered room, and it's safe for the day while they're.
Or a patron.
Or patron, very true. We talked about the electric vehicle charging stations, employee shuttles. We're gonna be running shuttles back and forth to Malden and Wellington, as we talked about. Again, this takes the load off. How do I get there? How do I get to work? Well, you take the train to Wellington, you get off, and there's a shuttle waiting for you. So that'll be easy. Water shuttle, we are very committed, and I don't want to speak for Bob, but we're very committed to promoting the water shuttle. We think it's a very neat way to get to the property. Not just efficient from a transportation point of view, but it's a good experience. It's a nice ride. So we'll be promoting that heavily. And we talk here about marketing and incentive plans. Over time, we'll figure out how to do this once we really get a sense of how this all works. Do we incentivize the water shuttle in a different way, the train, the buses? So that's always knobs we can be turning to make sure these systems are heavily used. Transportation monitoring, as you know, we're committed to monitor the transportation. We're not just hoping it works. Through our MEPA process and through the Section 61 finding, we will be regularly monitoring the transportation. We'll be reporting to you, we'll be reporting to the DOT, to the City of Everett, and we'll be explaining what we think is happening with mode splits and riderships and that sort of stuff. And frankly, we'll be adjusting things. We'll all work together to make sure it works well. As you see here, if we're off by more than 10% in something, if we sort of over or underestimated how people are going to get there, we'll make adjustments. Where things like retiming of signals, additional incentives, increased bicycle parking, more electric vehicle charging, more local and regional shuttles. We don't know what the issue might be, so we don't know what solution will work, but we're committed that we'll find a solution for it. And this isn't a comprehensive list. There may be other things that you or we come up with that say, gee, if you added 2 more of these, you'd have better luck with that. So we're very, very committed to keep very close track of transportation. And again, as we said from our first meeting, it isn't just to check a box. This is good for us. If customers are really sick and tired of how the traffic's working, they're not going to be happy. So this is in our best interest to make sure this works.
Chris, something like this, the transportation monitoring, when do you anticipate to begin the monitoring?
It starts every 6 months once we open, and eventually
After opening.
transitions to once a year. So in the first several years, we'll do it every 6, and it's a structured program. We actually have to submit a plan of here's what we're going to measure, here's what we're going to measure, so there's actually a structure to it. And then every 6 months, we'll go out and measure everything. It's done through surveys and traffic counts and in interviews and that sort of stuff. And then eventually it goes to yearly, and then eventually, hopefully, it's in good shape. But we'll be doing it every 6 months to start.
Okay.
About $58 million in roadway improvements. The big ones are on this list, and I'll walk you through them. Wellington, Sullivan Square, Santilli, Sweetser, and Lower Broadway, and I'll break those down each individually. But as you can see, they're the major transportation intersections around our property that we feel that there's a need for mitigation, and we will be mitigating those spaces. Starting off with the City of Everett, we have the most work to do in Everett. We have $14.5 million worth of work to do in Everett before we open. So, and this is all off our property. On Revere Beach Parkway, primarily Santilli Circle, Santilli Highway, we'll be re-signaling, rebuilding, and doing parts of that to optimize the transportation flow through the Revere Beach Parkway. Sweetser Circle, which is right at the end of Broadway, just beyond our property, we're restriping, relining, widening, doing a number of things in Sweetser Circle to make that flow better. That's about $2 million. Lower Broadway, that's $4 million. That's both Broadway itself, which runs in front of our property, and the truck lane that parallels it on Robin and Dexter. So that gets completely rebuilt with traffic islands, new signals, turning lanes, landscaping. One little example that you've probably heard about, but one of the biggest problems on Broadway is left-hand turns. There's no left-hand turning lane, so if one car wants to go to McDonald's, they can hold up traffic for 10 minutes. So this adds turning lanes at each intersection so somebody can pull off and let traffic flow. Little things like that are gonna make a big difference on Broadway. And again, we're far into the design of these. We've already done the surveys, we've done the roadway safety audits, and we're doing conceptual design. Lower Broadway truck route, that's another big item. We want to pull trucks off of Broadway. This has been a goal of the city for many, many years, and now we're finally funding it. So Dexter and Robin will be significantly improved, so trucks will have a better way to get over toward Charlestown and up north toward Malden and Medford instead of just going down Broadway. City of Boston, as you know, by far the bulk of this is Sullivan Square. We're going to spend around $11 million. If you look at the first item, second, third item, we're at about $11 million for the Sullivan Square mitigation. This is to mitigate our traffic. In addition, we're committed $25 million to a longer-term fix, and you know that story as well as we do about the strong interest in a long-term fix in Sullivan Square. We're also funding the study group that's been meeting, and then Bob's a member of that. They've started. We're putting $250,000 toward that as well to try and facilitate the permanent fix. And again, we like this. We think a long-term fix in Sullivan Square is good news, so we're committed to do this. If you look at the next plan, we can answer any detailed questions, but this is the overview of what we're doing in Sullivan Square for our mitigation. This is the $11 million in mitigation. The biggest thing you might notice as you come off the ramp off 93, Cambridge Street is rebuilt. You have options. You can now go left toward the MBTA station at a signal. You can go right down Spice Street and D Street. You can go out to Moffaway and up 38 that way. So it pulls a lot of traffic off Cambridge Street, which is where the biggest bottleneck is today. It also rebuilds the connection with Main Street, which is another big bottleneck. So this will absolutely mitigate our traffic. And then again, the follow-on we expect at some point will be a longer-term fix for the overall plan for Sullivan Square. In Medford, we have some work to do in Medford, primarily in Wellington Circle. This is lane widening. This is re-signalization. It's about $4 million worth of work to do in Wellington. A busy intersection. It doesn't work bad today, but it can certainly work better. So with our traffic, we want to do this mitigation work. We've also, if you notice the last item, we've committed to $1.5 million to study. They have a long-term idea that someday they've talked about tunnels, overpasses, bypasses, all kinds of big ideas, which is all good thinking. So they asked us to fund that study. So we've committed $1.5 million for them to study potential solutions on a grander scale for Wellington Circle way down the road that might be needed in future decades. So that money is in here as well. Revere, we have a little bit of work to do in Bell Circle. This is mostly optimization. There's some signal optimization that'll go on in Bell Circle for the city of Revere. City of Chelsea, we have work to do on Route 16. Again, most of this is signal work. A lot of these signals are old, and by putting in new signals, you can do a lot more of a electronic solution or a simulation of how they actually work. And in Sullivan Square, we're tying them back to the City of Boston's controls. So all the new work we're doing on Sullivan Square will be with a hard wire, 3,800 feet of wiring back. They can actually monitor and change the signals in Sullivan Square from their control center, which they can't do today. Same with some of these others. They won't be controlled by Boston, but by putting new signals in these intersections, they're just much smarter signals. You can do a lot more with them than just, red light, green light kind of thing. If you look at a comparison, and this is not to brag or to point fingers, but if you look at our mitigation compared to other recent projects, we're quite proud of what we've done. The first slide shows that if you look at we're at about 3 million square feet, and we're at $265 million in private funds and zero in public fund, which dwarfs anything even remotely close to us. So, and again, we're not pointing fingers at them, but we're saying we think we're quite proud of what we've done, and that's a big number. It's in graphical form. The next slide, if you look, we are many times higher in the blue bar than any other private money that is out there. Again, we're getting zero public money, so we're doing this all with their own funds.
Chris, can I mention something?
Sure.
Your 3 million square feet include the garage,
Correct.
right?
It's half and
Because
half.
it's about 1.4 million square feet of actual.
Correct.
Do you know if the other properties include parking?
I believe they do, but we can check that.
Okay.
I mean, things like Assembly Row has significant parking garages there.
Yes.
Station Landing does. but we can absolutely double check to make sure they're apples to apples with parking and not parking.
Just curious.
Yeah. Site remediation, briefly, as I said, one of the things we're very proud of is the remediation. This was talked about for 30 years, and now we're almost done with Phase 1, which is the worst of it. If you remember, our remediation has 3 phases. Phase 1 is getting rid of the very worst material. This is primarily the arsenic, the lead, the copper, the heavy metals that were migrating around the site, also repairing the low pH area, which was deteriorating the heavy metals and allowing them to move toward the river. So that Phase 1 was put out to bid last year. Charter Contracting, who's a Boston company, actually a Boston minority-owned company, won that bid. They have been out there. They've done an extremely good job. Our LSP, GZA, has kept an eye on them, and we're almost done. We're within probably 2 or 3 weeks of having the site closed up from the remediation point of view. So Phase 1 is almost done. Now we have Phase 2 and Phase 3. Phase 2 is part of the excavation, removing all that material. That is not proceeding until we get our approvals to proceed with our building. And then, of course, Phase 3 is out in the harbor, removing the sediments in the harbor, which won't proceed again until we get all of our permits. But those are the 3 phases, the worst of which is done. We also became a PIP site, which is the Petition for Public Involvement. This is when taxpayers can petition to have more information about the remediation. They did that for our site, which worked fine. We had a number of public hearings. We did weekly reports for them. We communicated with them. And at least from our vantage point, that seemed to go quite well, especially the public meetings. There were a lot of people who showed up, a lot of good questions. They were constructive. They were good questions about trucks and dirt and noise and dust and the things you'd expect them to ask. So from our point of view, the PIP process was fine. There's a handful of photos. If you look at the first one, this is sort of midstream in the remediation. You can see there's a dewatering basin to the upper left. Looks like a big hockey rink. That's where you put water and you dewater the site by pumping water into there. Below that, you see there are some large piles of dirt that are beginning to be processed. In the upper right, there are some cells. You can see how there are petitioned off areas. That's different kinds of contaminant. One of those might be lead, one might be arsenic, one might be PCBs. They're all tested, they're all treated on site, and then they're eventually put on trucks and taken to landfills. We went as far away as Michigan. We've actually gone to Quebec. We've gone to New Hampshire. We've trucked this stuff all over the place. About 300 trucks of dirt have left the site. We've probably got 10 trucks left, and we're very happy with how it went. We've had no reported incidences at all. The dust monitoring has been reported. So, and we've got very detailed documentation on where everything went. Next photo is just an example of some of the excavation we did. We went down quite deep to get the contaminants. What we found is everything that was ever left behind we've got. Railroad ties, foundations, tires, blocks, bricks. The site has 100 years of stuff. So every scoopful of dirt, none of it's bad. I mean, we found one oil tank, but generally it's all innocent stuff, but the site has just got a little bit of everything. So you get down through the 8 feet from Deer Island, then you get about 8 or 10 feet of debris and dirt and everything else, and then you get to clean dirt below that. So nothing unexpected, but we found what we thought. Another shot of excavation. This is just supportive excavation to make sure the hole was fine. Another shot showing how the intent of these pictures is not just to show you sheathing, but the level of effort you have to go through to get down to the dirty dirt was extensive. We had to put this metal sheathing all around it. We had to dewater it. We had to dig down 15 or 20 feet, find in some cases very small pockets of contamination, remove that, and then put all the dirt back in again. So to get to these pockets of contamination was an extensive effort. You'll see in this picture, it looks like a crime scene almost. In the lower middle of the picture, you'll see there's a hole there. That is where the PCBs were, and that is by far the worst contamination we had on the site. Those have all left now. They've gone to Michigan. So that little tiny orange fenced area was what made the site untouchable for a lot of developers for many years. It's completely gone, so we're happy to say that's left the site. Next is just an aerial photo from a drone showing how the site was being remediated. Next 2 slides are more on the water. You can do these, want me to do these?
I'll take them.
Okay.
On the water transportation program, we've been spending a lot of time thinking about this. As most of you know from our previous meetings, our goal is to connect ourselves with the rest of the inner Boston Harbor. And so we want to do that through Long Wharf or over by World Trade Center or Pier 4. There's some options down there. So in the next slide on 59, we've had some discussion with Boston Harbor Cruises. Matter of fact, this is a proposed boat design, and we've been using Gladding Hearn, a Massachusetts company, to look at this. This is a 49-passenger vessel that is only about 9'6" to 10 feet in height, so it will go underneath the Alfred Street Bridge with the bridge closed. One of the main concerns was that we did not want to cause any additional traffic problems with our water transportation. So this design was custom done for us, for our project, and it shows a really neat configuration. We've got this set up where we'd be able to have great ADA access at our dock height, and we can have about 49 passengers in a very nice environment, climate controlled, heated in the winter, air conditioned in the summer, some exterior space where you can go outside, and we think this would create a very pleasant ride from Boston Harbor right up through to where we are at the mouth of the Mystic. And then on the page 60, this is a proposed schedule. So in some discussions back and forth with Boston Harbor Cruises, we were thinking that there'd probably be a peak season, off-peak season schedule. Obviously, less traffic on the water in the winter. It also gives you time to do maintenance, pull the boats out of the water, do the required things that are necessary. So while none of this is set in stone yet, it's just to show you that we've had very active and ongoing discussions with operators for this potential water transportation system. And the net result is it's extremely doable. We think it'll be a very unique way to get folks to and from, and it obviously takes cars off the road. So we're really excited about the possibility of the water transportation program.
Quick question. I know your original projection was 6%, I believe?
That's correct.
Is that?
And still is.
It still is?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Bob, you also mentioned earlier that there was a 9 feet swing in your.
Correct.
In the high water, low water. Does that affect any of these?
What we have actually the dock system that will float up and down with the tide. So taking into consideration navigational dredging that's required that Chris had mentioned, the cleanup. There's some, right now, there's old, you've got old barges. All that has to be removed in a later phase of remediation. But once we do the navigational dredging and we install our new bulkhead and docking system, we'll be able to accommodate that 8-9 foot tidal swing and still have great ADA access on the dock system. It's all about ratios and distance of ramp systems and the docks to make sure that it all works.
And the bridge at high tide on a normal day has 12 feet of clearance. So a
Okay.
9-foot boat can easily make it under it. On a stormy day, there'd be, obviously you have to factor that in, but on a normal day, almost every day of the year, it's 12 feet of clearance at high tide.
We literally, as part of this process, went out in the water, went and did the trip. It took about 20 minutes, 20 to 22 minutes to get from our site to downtown area. We looked at the watermarks. Originally, we were thinking that maybe we could have a little higher vessel, but to play it safe, we want to go with no more than about 9.6 so that we can make sure we're not having that bridge crank up. So again, we've done quite a bit of investigation work. We're still in the process. This is nowhere near set yet, but we wanted the commission to understand that we're thinking long and hard about this and want to make sure that it works quite well and that it's a really fun kind of ride to get folks to and from. And with that, I'm going to, if you wouldn't mind just turning this to the summary page on 61. I think what you've heard today is quite a comprehensive story. When you think about us, now is the, always was, and now it continues to be the largest private development project in the Commonwealth, the 4,000 jobs, union jobs to build it, the 4,000 permanent jobs, $660 million a year in the taxes, fees, wages, and operational costs, a $2 billion price tag for this particular project, $840 million in community and mitigation payments over a 15-year period, including $574 million to our host and surrounding communities, and another $266 million in road infrastructure and traffic demand management program, another $58 million in roadway improvements, and really a holistic, multimodal, sustainable transportation strategy that really tries to use public transportation, water transportation, any shuttle systems, any means possible to get cars off the road and into the facility. And on top of that, about a $30 million site remediation, all of it 100% privately funded. When you think about the commitment on behalf of Wynn Resorts for a project of this nature, it really is nothing short of incredible. We feel like we have done the most in-depth due diligence, environmental filings that any project has ever gone through that we've ever heard of, including 5 trips through MIPA. So for anyone that has any questions at all about our mitigation package and the effort that we put out, I think today's presentation puts those arguments to bed. And thank you very much for giving us some time today.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission members that, do we have, what would be the next part? Do we have Rick Moore and Company to
We
come?
would, and we just suggest, I don't know if the commission wants a break or not, but we would transition to our consultants at this point.
What's the, yeah, I'll take, let's take a 5-minute break, please.
Great, thank you.
We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back. I believe we have next presentation by our consultants.
That's right. We
Councilor
have
Blue?
Rick Moore here with our commission consultants to summarize the report that's in your package.
Thank you, Commissioners, and
Thank you.
first, thank you for the break. We all needed one. I'm Rick Moore with City Point Partners, and with me is Jason Sobel from Green International and Jason Lawson from PMA. And particularly Jason and I have been involved in this process from the very, very beginning when the application was first submitted. And I'd just like to talk for a few minutes about process and then some of the mitigation issues. I'll probably try to be brief because you had a very comprehensive presentation. The Section 61 finding process is typically a fairly routine process for projects. Here, it's slightly different. Normally what happens is through the MIPA process, the notification form, the draft and final EIRs, in this case they were supplemental EIRs, a mitigation package is formulated and is built through consensus. The project is described, the impacts are defined, the mitigation is defined, the public agencies all have a chance to comment multiple times in this case, and that brings together a package of mitigation. Then the agencies, like yourselves, and the other agencies who are required to have what they call subject jurisdiction. In other words, they're issuing a state permit. They take the MIPA process, which they participated in, and they basically ratify it in the Section 61 finding. So typically, there's nothing new, and that's why I think what you've seen here, you've seen essentially all before. There's really nothing new here. But the Secretary of Environmental Affairs required, as was explained earlier, a more elaborate Section 61 finding for this project, where there'll be a public hearing, they'll get comments, and essentially it's a second or another chance for comments and evaluation, even though there have been 6 or 7 up to this point. In order to have that process to be a little bit more robust, what you do see differently here, and I think it's in your intention, is to bring all the various mitigation packages together in one place. Because unlike most projects where you just have the MIPA mitigation, here now you have other agency Section 61 findings, which are in most cases identical to the MIPA. Those are the ones from DOT, MWRA, et cetera. And you also have, unlike almost any other project in the Commonwealth, the host and the surrounding community agreements, which have their own set of mitigation. And so all of this is brought together in one place in the draft Section 61 findings that you're deliberating on now. And that provides the public and anyone else now an opportunity for, again, another round of comments. So it's a fairly robust process. Let me talk a minute about the mitigation and just summarize it as we see it in advising you. Generally, we see mitigation in 2 pieces. First, you have the mitigation essentially on-site. And those with the mitigation, the cleanup, all the lead, gold processes, the energy efficiency, the water efficiency, all of those types of issues, using the materials and recycling them, all those package up to give you a mitigation package for the site. Now, you can argue that a lot of that mitigation is required. The remediation is required. The lead gold is required by your regulations. But most of the regulations and most of the requirements in Massachusetts have a very high bar. And these bars have been met or exceeded on site. And essentially, and again, you can argue whether it's required or not, essentially what you and the Commonwealth are getting is a clean site, a sustainable facility, gold certifiable, and a facility that has significantly more access by the public to the waterfront than before. So it's our judgment that in terms of the responsibility that you have and that the other regulatory agencies have, the mitigation package on site, if you will, identifies all the impacts, mitigates them or avoids them, and either meets or exceeds the requirements of the regulations. And we're comfortable with that package. If you go off-site, it's almost exclusively a discussion about transportation. And if you look at the transportation package, which again is robust and you've heard it in some detail, it has roadway, it has rail, transit, it's got water, it's got pedestrian, it's got bicycle. It's a very robust package. And in almost every one of those categories, it rises above the minimum requirements and actually adds benefit. I'll talk about one or two of those in a minute. But certainly one of them, I believe, and we believe, is the water transportation and the robust effort to divert, and the whole purpose of the transit and the water transportation is divert people out of their cars into alternative modes of transportation. So we think it's a robust, adequate, and it meets the requirements of mitigating the impacts of the project. Now, I'd like to spend just a minute on one particular aspect of that, and that's Sullivan Square, which gets the majority of the comments. Sullivan Square essentially has a two-step process going on. And the first step is what you might call the minimum MIPA requirements. It's to minimize or avoid impacts from the casino in Sullivan Square. And the mitigation that accomplishes that threshold is that $10 or $11 million of roadway improvements that you saw the diagram of along Cambridge Street and Moffa Way, and the signal and the interaction with the bus terminal. That does what MIPA requires. It mitigates the impacts from the casino. Through the MIPA process, this concept of a long-term plan was developed in some level, and it's a result actually of the MIPA process. But as the Secretary of Environmental Affairs and as the Secretary of Transportation said, this long-term process, which is the second track, which goes on parallel, if you will, is separate from the MIPA process and over above, if you will, the MIPA process. And that track actually has two of its own sub-tracks, if you will. The first of those is being done right now by the City of Boston, which is to re-examine, through their ongoing 25% design contract, the alternatives for Sullivan Square. They own Sullivan Square, they're responsible for Sullivan Square, they will come up with the recommended plan for Sullivan Square. And that is ongoing right now. And once they come up with their preferred plan, that will be dovetailed into the long-term DOT working group that was originally called the Sullivan Square Working Group, is now called the Lower Mystic River Working Group. And that looks at a more regional transportation issue. But it takes the specific recommendations for Sullivan Square, puts it in a long-term context, and sees what the long-term or regional impact of that is. That's all good for the Commonwealth. The Wynn folks are partly funding, as you saw, the actual study, which will take about 18 months. And they're also putting the $25 million in for the long-term plan. But that is not, that's over and above, as we determine the regulations, the MIPA process, and is on a separate track. And when you take the minimum, if you will, MIPA requirements, when you take the long-term approach, when you add that into the sustainability and the on-site package, we think the mitigation package that's been proposed here that combines all the different pieces satisfies and in some respects goes above the requirements. And I think a telling proof of that at some level is the slide that showed the amount of private funding going into in the particular case there, the off-site roadway improvements, based on what is typical and what we see as typical for these type of projects in the Commonwealth. Now, there's two other points I would like to make. The first one has to do with what I sometimes call the look-back provision. That's the monitoring plan, so that we're not done once the Section 61 findings are issued. There will be a monitoring plan. It was talked about collecting traffic data. Both the City of Boston, DOT, and the Commission itself has very significant ability to open up the package, the mitigation package, open up the Section 61 finding, if you will, if the actual traffic does not track what has been estimated to actually occur in the future, and if there needs to be more mitigation or different mitigation or a different package, that's within your purview, and you reserve the right in the Section 61 findings to do that. It's in your regulations. It's very well established, and it's a very powerful tool, and I think it's consistent with the Commission's overall responsibility to keep track of these facilities. It's not just to permit them, it's to keep track through construction and through operation that they continually mitigate and propose all feasible mitigation to avoid and mitigate impacts. So I think if you have the existing package, and then you have the ability to check that existing package and see whether it works. That's a good combination. The last thing I'd like to mention is that, although I said in the beginning there were no surprises, there are two small things that we're recommending that will be additions in your Section 61 findings that you didn't see necessarily in the MEPA process. And these come out as a result of the many comments that have occurred from DOT's Section 61 finding process, and the other agencies have their processes and have gotten comments, and you will get a series of comments through your Section 61 finding. We're anticipating some of those questions will be the same. And we've looked at those questions, and for the large majority, we don't see the issues or the questions that have been raised since the end of the MEPA process warrant changing the mitigation, with two small exceptions. In the case of the City of Somerville, there's a host community agreement with the City of Somerville. During the process of reaching that, a surrounding community agreement, excuse me, during the process of reaching that, Somerville contended that there was some additional traffic mitigation that was warranted in Somerville. We saw no technical basis for that charge or that request, and we think that the way the surrounding community agreement was finally approved, it makes sense. However, there is one intersection that we're proposing in Somerville be added to the monitoring plan, and that intersection is on Broadway, and it's just upstream from Sullivan Square. And the reason we're recommending that that be added to the monitoring program is not because of the amount of traffic that the casino will divert through that intersection, but more specifically because if for some reason the traffic in Sullivan Square in the future does not mimic what has been projected, and there's backup through, it would be Moffett Way back into Broadway, it could impact the first intersection in Somerville, which is the intersection of Lomister Way and Broadway. And so we're recommending that that intersection be added to the monitoring plan so that in the future, if it's impacted, we'll have some data that can inform a future mitigation. And then the second change comes from some comments from the city of, from Charlestown, and that has to do with the lighting. And so we're recommending that in the Section 61 finding, and you'll see it in there, is a requirement that Wynn provide a lighting plan so that the folks in Charlestown can get a better understanding of how the lighting plan could affect their environment in Charlestown. But other than that, what you're seeing is a result directly of the MEPA process, the surrounding community and host community agreements, and the other agency Section 61 findings. And that, yes. Commissioner.
Rick, I had a question, just to go back to Sullivan Square for a moment, since you rightly pointed out those are the majority of the comments that we receive pertaining to that long-term plan. you talked about the two phases, the city of Boston, and then that gets incorporated into the larger plan. In your dealings, are all the right stakeholders there, to identify federal, state, local monies, all of those things happening? I just wanted a little more detail, if I could, on that plan itself. It's working?
Yes, I would say it's working. It took a bit to get off the ground. There was a little, discussion as, what the shape of the table should be, as you might imagine, because there are a number of constituents. But the right communities, the right state agencies, and the right interested parties, I think, are at the table. You have CTPS and the Metropolitan Area Planning Council doing the actual technical work. They have an enormous amount of data already that they constantly update, so they're the best people to look at a regional plan. And the city of Boston, importantly, is at the table, and they are very sensitive to how the interaction of their workings in Sullivan Square are put into the regional plan. And I think, actually, if you think about it, this is how the process is supposed to work. The MEPA process, if you will, hatch this kind of concept, as far as I can tell, and that's the way it's supposed to happen. Normally, MEPA would stop at your minimum impacts from the facility. But in this case, the secretary, both secretaries, found it useful to go beyond that and use the MEPA process to develop this concept. And now it's actually working, and there's no indication why it shouldn't develop a plan that has, quite frankly, taken some time in the development process, and hopefully everyone will be on board and finally solve the long-term plan in Sullivan Square with a considerable contribution from the Wynn folks.
So, can you just point to me where that additional intersection to be studied is in the draft? Do we have it here, or?
The additional intersection,
Yes, the one in Somerville that you're recommending should be added to the monitoring program.
what page? Maybe get a little.
Or rather, my question is more simple. Is it already reflected in the draft that
yeah.
we are putting?
It is reflected in the draft as well as the lighting plan request. So
That was going to
yes.
be the second question
They're both in the draft that you have in your package.
in the draft.
The intersection's on page 30, and the lighting plan would probably be under Boston's,
And so just taking one at a time, the intersection is one of how many intersections are going to be studied as part, just roughly, right?
there's a dozen or more intersections.
Yeah, okay. So adding
It's a
one.
very, very comprehensive.
Yes, adding one seems reasonable. And the page for the lighting plan, I know that was,
It is on page 43.
There have been renderings of the new hotel. In fact, you probably saw one at nighttime, but this will go somewhat beyond that with some more technical information.
you said 43 or?
Should be in the second, on page 43, the second section. And it will say something along the lines of, the Wynn will provide a lighting plan to the commission.
This is also something that the city of Everett is interested in.
Yes, okay. I see it. And it's during construction and post-occupancy, because that applies to all the mitigation improvement measures in this table, right?
That's right.
That's fair enough. Other questions for Mr. Moore, or?
Rick, I just had a question picking up on what Commissioner Cameron asked. We repeatedly hear that there's significant federal transportation dollars kind of in the balance with respect to either being utilized for Sullivan Square improvements or kind of surrounding area transportation issues. Is somebody from the feds, even though this is not a federal highway, but it'd be federal money, is somebody from the appropriate federal agencies participating in these, in the?
The federal folks delegate that to the State Department of Transportation, so they're the ones that have the control over managing the monies that come to the state of Massachusetts from the federal government. And then the Congressman Capuano is very much involved in the process and interested in the whole process and the outcome.
Rick, I'm abstaining from any vote here, but I'm curious about this lighting plan. I saw the reference to it in the draft, but it's just says lighting plan. What is a lighting plan?
Well, to some degree, to lighting folks, it's in a term of art. The city of Everett has also requested, in my understanding, a lighting plan. It's a photometric plan, primarily to show that lighting on site does not spill over into the adjacent properties and might cause disruption or inconvenience to a direct abutter. But this lighting plan also informs, how you might see the site from alternative locations. But there's no question that the facility will be lit at night. Up to this point, there have been discussions with the folks in Charlestown about this. The lighting is not directed, outside the property. The lighting is directed primarily to illuminate the actual tower itself and the lower rise buildings. So the primary issue is not so much lighting directed off the property as it is reflected light or glare, if you will. And that can be shown by technical drawings.
And with the idea being that if the lighting, reflected lighting, was at a certain level that was seen to, interfere with the aesthetic judgments of the people that were experiencing it, then we would have a lever to address that?
Well, this is another one of those issues that can be re-examined, and there's some flexibility in how Wynn develops their lighting plan, which is underdeveloped now, and they're sensitive to this issue, and they're talking to the folks of Charlestown. So I think that this issue can be resolved.
Rick, you also made a quick reference to the other projects that were presented before by the licensee and the level of mitigation that came mostly from public sources. I'm curious, an alternative project on this site would have probably done, perhaps have more impacts on the environment in terms of traffic, for example. If there were to have been condos on that site, you would have 2 peak hours as opposed to 1. Do you want to comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, that's not completely hypothetical, because in the municipal harbor plan that was Everett's municipal harbor plan that was approved by DEP, they had 2 alternatives. One was the casino, and the other was a residential development. And you're quite right, whether it's residential or office, you have a morning and peak hour. The casino, although there is some traffic in the morning, it's nominal compared to what you would get with the kind of development that, say, an office or a residential development. The size of one of those developments on that site to support the cleanup and the variety of other things you'd have to do would be substantial. And you'd have a traffic peak that you wouldn't have from the casino. So to some degree, the casino is a beneficial traffic generator, if you will, because of that minimal AM peak hour. Nevertheless, the City of Boston and Mass DOT required Wynn to look at the AM peak hour to make sure that their proposed traffic signal system would operate properly in the AM, despite the fact that there weren't many casino-generated trips in the AM. So it was looked at both in the AM and PM, but more from an operational standpoint.
All right. Other questions for Mr. Moore? Anything else, Council?
No, if the commission has no suggested changes to the draft that's in front of you, staff will post this, and we will make a request for comments, and then we will work towards our public meeting on the 29th. This is obviously not the last opportunity for the commission to make comments or changes, so as the commission sits through the public hearing and as you review comments as they come in, if you decide you want changes to this draft, we can certainly do that. So, but we will move forward, post this, and ask for comments.
Yeah, I just want to mention something that was already mentioned, just emphasize that there's always this is at one point in time, phase here that we have, the MIPA process, and we have the ability to come back and that clawback provision, if you will, in the process to come back and do this, relook at the assumptions, confirm some of the traffic as it shows up or not. And I would add that there's the Community Mitigation Fund. That's another tool that the legislature gave us for these very purposes that come right after that, in my estimation. And we continue to fine-tune that program, and we'll get requests from surrounding communities, host communities, others, and all of these will be seen holistically as we continue that evaluation. Let me mention that there's a lot of work that happened here, of course, by the applicant, by our consultants, Anderson and Krieger as well, and Council Blue and Ombudsman Siemba. And there's a lot of great detail that we will post on our website for public comment, and we look forward to all of those comments that I know we'll get. They're usually very thoughtful and studious, and we'll go forward towards scheduling or posting notice of our public hearing, if I'm correct.
We have the notice in draft. If we haven't posted it today, we'll be posting it
We'll
tomorrow.
post that notice, and that public hearing is for next Tuesday,
It's March the 29th. It starts at 5 p.m.
5
It's
p.m.
at the Boston Convention Center.
And the public will have had an opportunity to have seen this draft for a few days now, obviously for the following week, and we'll be accepting comments until April 11th.
That's right.
At least that's the current schedule and the current thinking. All right. All right. Any other comments? Well, thank you very much, Rick and company, Jason and Jason.
Thank you. Good.
Let me see. Is there any? Did we need a vote on this, or?
No, we've determined this is the process going forward. You won't vote until April 14th.
Okay,
So you just need a motion to adjourn and a second.
okay. So I will entertain a
Move to
motion to
adjourn.
adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.